Moses' staff turning into a snake in Pharaoh's court is one of the strangest scenes in the entire Bible, but it's usually overshadowed by the 10 plagues that follow. But here's what most people miss. It wasn't Moses' staff, and it wasn't a snake. And what happens in Exodus 7 wasn't a magic trick. It was a direct assault on Pharaoh's divine authority. And if you miss it, you miss the entire framework of the Exodus story. Hey everyone, I'm Brad. I'm a PhD candidate, and on this channel I explore the fascinating world of mythology as it relates to the biblical text. And today we're breaking down this magical staff showdown in Pharaoh's court, the mythology behind it, and why this moment quietly declares the outcome of the 10 plagues before the Nile turns to blood. Now, before dissecting the details within this story, I want to provide a very quick recap of these 15 verses found in Exodus 6:28 through 7:13. Moses and Aaron are standing before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh demands a sign. And Aaron throws down his staff, and it becomes what most English translations call a snake. The Egyptian priests in turn replicate the act. Then Aaron's staff devours theirs. That's the story. But the story is doing something much bigger. And here's where it starts to unravel. First, and you probably picked up on this, it wasn't Moses' staff. The text is explicit. It's Aaron's. This isn't incidental, it's intentional. It matters, because we tend to think it's Moses' staff, since this happened with Moses' staff in chapter 4. And it's also Moses' staff that is used in the first plague of the Nile turning to blood, just 2 verses after this narrative ends. And again, this isn't a magic show. This is a cultic confrontation. But we're not even to the peak of the story yet. And this is where most people stop reading. Which is unfortunate, because this is where the entire scene shifts. For 2 reasons. And these 2 reasons are going to be missed within English translations of the Bible. And the first of these is what exactly Aaron's staff turned into. And this might be surprising, but it likely wasn't describing an ordinary snake. This wasn't zoological, this was theological. Because the Hebrew word here is tannin. And as Robert Alter points out, this usually refers to a larger, threatening reptile. Sometimes even the Egyptian crocodile or a mythological dragon. And elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, tannin refers to dragons, sea monsters, and chaos creatures. Now again, the reason we tend to think this is a snake is because Moses' staff is said to have turned into a snake in the English translations of the Bible in Exodus 4. And this is reaffirmed in the following narrative in Exodus 7:15. But in those instances, the Hebrew word is nachash, which is the typical word used of a snake or a serpent within the biblical text. Although this term can take on mythological references as well. But again, its most common usage is that of a snake. Now, the second reason this scene has shifted is really 2 reasons wrapped up into one, and that is regarding the significance of the staff's transformation. And to understand this, we need to consider ancient Egypt and the iconography associated with it. Because Egyptian scarabs and royal seals, like the ones pictured here, frequently show cobras, rising from formal bases, symbols of sovereign authority and divine protection. The serpent wasn't decorative. It was royal theology in visual form. It represented divine kingship, protection, authority, as well as cosmic order. So when Aaron's staff becomes a tannin, it's an assault on Pharaoh's divine legitimacy. And when Aaron's staff devours the staffs of Pharaoh's priests in the ancient world, this would have been perceived as the god Aaron serves as being superior to the gods of Egypt, and specifically to Pharaoh, who was viewed as the incarnate Horus. So again, before the Nile turns to blood, which is the first plague, Egypt's divine authority has already been symbolically devoured. And furthermore, Egyptian tradition itself preserves stories of magicians who could transform serpents into rigid staffs and back again. Accounts of figures like the sage Abba-Aner and King Nectanebo II describe rods used to perform such feats, reflecting a long-standing Egyptian pride in controlling venomous serpents and wielding magical authority. And this wasn't just true for Egyptian religion regarding the relationship with serpentine figures. In the Ugaritic myth, Baal defeats Yam. In Mesopotamian myth, Marduk defeats Tiamat. And here in Exodus, a staff becomes a chaos creature. But in this instance, Adonai, the god of the Hebrews, weaponizes it against the Egyptians. He uses their own device of divine authority against them to demonstrate his superiority. And this is part B of reason 2, but it's important to note that the text states that it's Aaron's staff that devoured the staff of the priests. It was not the tannin devouring the tannin, which means that the emphasis of this story is not the creature that the staff turned into, but on the staff itself, which is exactly the opposite of how we as moderns read the story. So what's really going on here is that Egypt's symbol of royal authority is turned against itself and then consumed. And this is where the structure becomes undeniable. The plagues are not random disasters, and they're not chaos either, but rather they're a verdict. More simply put, they are a dismantling of Egypt's gods and religion. But here's the deeper question. If this staff showdown scene already declares theological defeat for the Egyptians, why send the 10 plagues at all? And the reason is because Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And these plagues are not exclusively about proving power. They are about enforcing a verdict that was already established. The scene is being set for cosmic warfare. It will be Adonai versus the gods of Egypt. And the Exodus story is structured as polemic. And this confrontation doesn't begin with the first plague of the Nile turning to blood. It begins with a symbolic conquest in Pharaoh's court. And one verse that almost no one talks about in regards to this is that in chapter 7, verse 1, which is at the beginning of this narrative, Adonai says to Moses, "See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet." Now you likely already know or recall from earlier that Pharaoh was viewed as the incarnate Horus. And here, Adonai has said that he will make Moses God unto Pharaoh. So in reality, and especially for an ancient reader of this text, this is more than two people standing in a court where staffs devour other staffs. These are the divine representatives of two gods. So this isn't just a story. It's theological warfare embedded in mythic imagery. And I think most of you are aware of this. The Bible wasn't written in isolation. It's written in competition. It competes with the religious views of its time, just as every culture, certainly including ours, has done throughout the course of history. So here in Exodus, before Egypt understands what's happening, its authority had already been devoured whole in Pharaoh's courtroom, not by an ordinary snake, but by something far more mythical. But I want to know what you think the tannin was. A snake? A crocodile? Chaos creature? Or something entirely different? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Because if it wasn't just an ordinary snake, then something far bigger was devoured in Pharaoh's court that day. It wasn't just a staff. It was Egypt's claim to divine authority. And if that verdict was declared before the first plague, then the plagues aren't the beginning of a war. They're the execution of it. And if you want to know how each plague was an attack on Egypt's religion and its gods, you can click this link right here. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.